I'm delighted to welcome today Jules Turner, who is a motivational coach. Welcome, Jules, to the podcast.
Thank you, Elaine, for inviting me on. It's a real pleasure.
Most welcome. So, first obvious question, what is a motivational coach? What do you do?
Well, so I help to empower people to live the life that they want, as opposed to live the life that they think they should be living. There's many people out there that have, have sort of got stuck in this rut because traditionally, or sort of going right back in their lives, they've gone down this path of living this life. And it's not necessarily what it is that they really want. It's more about what it is that they think they should, because they've almost like been told by other people, this is how you live your life. This is we're sort of programmed to do things potentially on other people's terms, and it kind of gets us into this real rut. And my mission is really to help people to discover what it is that they really want from their lives and start to engage in that idea and move towards it. And the reason why I got into it is because of my own situation. I was living the life I thought I should, and I ended up being seriously ill over it. And then I discovered coaching, and I thought, this is a fantastic method of motivating not only other people but myself. I mean, during my illness, I used a variety of different sort of self-help techniques to get me through that particular period of time, and like goal setting and that sort of thing. But the other thing that I found great about coaching is that you ask questions, you challenge people, and I've always been a person that loves asking questions. So that's kind of how I got into this. And I finally left corporate back in the early days of 2020, just before lockdown, and started my business. And I felt really congruent to that, because part of my mission is to get people to recognize that it's not just about the idea of success through going up the corporate ladder. It's about success in your life, because that's what you want. So your life, the things that you want, the opportunities that you desire, apart, if you can achieve that, that's part of your success. And it doesn't necessarily mean rising to the higher echelons of the corporate ladder, because you can take the skills that you've already got and already developed over time and use those skills in anything you like. And that's another fantastic part of it.
So, what did you do when you were in corporate, Jules?
So I worked in financial technology. I traditionally came from an IT background, and ended up in financial technology, looking after clients' needs. So I was a client relationship manager. A lot of that was revolved around selling software and services to clients, trying to manage clients' expectations while being on that sort of situation where you're having to empathize with the client, but also at the same time having to keep within the company line and the company values. So, which is a very, very difficult and fine balance, because coming from a background in technology, I absolutely knew the challenges that the clients were having, and having to try and manage their expectations, but also manage people internally to deliver, was a very, very high pressurizing job. Added to that, we also had that situation where we were expected to sell software and services to clients. And if if you weren't doing that, then there was always that undercurrent that, you know, your position was under a little bit of threat.
So many people go into a role in no matter what industry sector it is, no matter what they're doing, and find over a period of years that their job changes. My last husband, he started life in banking,
Yeah,
and you know, the old-fashioned bank tellers, you'd go up, hello, how are you today, blah blah, and you know, go about your business. And then over a period of years it turned into selling, and he was
yeah,
expected, for every person that walked in the door, he would have to sell to them
yeah,
a policy of some kind, or you
mm,
know, a meeting with a manager for a mortgage, or you know, whatever. And it's completely different skill sets, totally different ways of working, ways of being, and the stress that builds up. And in
yeah,
the end, I just said to him, just stop, you know, just leave your job.
mm,
Fortunately, I was high up in corporate at the time, so you know, money wasn't an issue. So
mm,
thankfully, but he literally was driving himself mad, and I was
yeah,
watching it day by day by day. He was in such a state. So
mm.
is that kind of what happened with you then?
It kind of, I think what also happened with me was that I was striving for what I perceived was success through agreeing to more and more. Um, and there was a lot of exciting things to do, but what was happening is that I was overcommitting myself, and part of that was my own attitude to money. I wanted to make more money, and my thinking was the only way that I was going to make more money was to commit myself and show up for more and more, um, and do as much as I could. Saying it sounds a bit odd, but saying yes to success, but I was actually creating a lot more stress in my life by doing that. And the the downside of that is, while I was doing more and more, nothing really changed. So I was committing more and more of my time, getting more and more stressed. But the reality, the rewards weren't as as great as I thought that they would be. So I was chasing something that wasn't necessarily there.
Yeah, and as you say, the expectations of society, when people are in corporate, you're expected to push and push and strive and go up the ladder, and bigger,
Yeah,
better positions, bigger, better roles. When I first got trained in the DISC model of behavioural profiling over 20 something years ago now, I first started supporting head teachers because I could
yeah,
see the impact that their behaviour was having on their teams, on the students in class. Teachers, you know, another example, they go into teaching because they love working with young people, inspiring them, motivating them, etc., etc. And as they go up through the ranks, head of department, head of this, that, vice head, you know, full head, etc., and they're actually running a business.
yeah,
So no matter what industry sector you look at, we see the same patterns. We see
yeah,
really good salespeople promoted to sales manager. What a load of nonsense!
yeah,
Because being a salesperson is a totally different skill set to managing people. So
yeah.
why is it that we, the royal we, you know, society, why do we keep doing this?
Well, that's a really good question. I think it I think it boils down to, and there's another parallel story that I read in Forbes about a lawyer who's a barrister actually. He was great at doing his job. He was brilliant at defending or in court. He was fantastic. And then suddenly he was given a people management job. And it's almost like, and what was happening with him is that he suddenly became really stressed because he wasn't good with people. He didn't want to manage people. He wanted to, he wanted to do the stuff that he was good at in court. And and I think there's this sort of false perception of, you know, the higher you go in the company, the more successful you are. But the reality of it is, that's untrue. You should be employed for the skills that you have and make the most of those skills, because in some ways, you're actually going to you're going to create more wealth for the company if you're good at what you're doing and you love what you're doing, rather than being promoted out of what you love doing to something that you hate doing, because your motivational side will suddenly drop because all you've got is managing other people, as opposed to the thing that you really want, which might be somebody else might be doing that now, and you think, why are they doing it that way, or why are they doing it that way? It's almost like it's expected that you have to take on more and more responsibility the higher you go, and they don't give you that opportunity to be a consultative type of influence to the people around you. It's almost like you have to manage those people around you, and you can't do what you really love doing. You just have to manage those people around you, you know. And it's I don't know where it comes from. It's just really bizarre.
It's bonkers, isn't it? Absolutely bonkers. I'm sure that as you progress through your new found love of coaching, you'll be coming up with all kinds of stories. I've got so many stories, and one that comes to mind is a transformational change project I did with a firm of accountants, and there were about 50 staff, and I was called in because the managing partner was really struggling with a particular director who was a tax expert, brain the size of a planet, absolute genius, and yet he was expected to manage people. What a load of nonsense. So my son has Asperger's syndrome, so I'm aware of the different behavioural challenges from neurodiversity.
Yeah.
So I brought in a coach who was a specific Asperger coach on the basis that it was business coaching.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the managing partner and I, we profiled all the team. We looked at who was working with who, what the personality styles were using the DISC model. We did a reorg, and then the guy who was really struggling, not only at work, nobody liked working with him because his behaviour was odd, you know. So it was causing real ripples throughout the organisation, and his marriage was in tatters because of this. He was taking the stress home. So long story short, we ended up giving him a new title under the reorg, popping him in a room with his PA, and he was as happy as Larry. We redistributed the people that were in his team to other parts of the business, and everybody lived happily ever after. And that's not rocket science, and you'll have lots of these stories in due course. It's bleeding obvious, isn't it? If somebody is not comfortable with what they're doing, it's going to impact their health, and you are a walking example of that.
And the thing is, it's like what you were saying, the ripple effect of that as well. You know, it creates havoc in your relationships, it creates havoc in your health, it creates havoc in all sorts of things. You know, and yet you're kind of forced down this rabbit hole, which you don't want to be. You don't want to be there. And the other thing about it is, right, is that you're down this rabbit hole. You don't want to be there, but you feel as though if you're going to say something, it's going to be threatening to you anyway. So you're kind of on this sort of in this kind of vortex of destruction, and yet if you're taken away from that situation and given something that you love doing, then your motivational levels go right the other way. And also at the same time, you'll start to get, because your stress levels go right down, everything starts to become a lot better for you and the people around you. It's you know, when we're talking about this together, the idea is so simple, and yet as a society, we always seem to overcomplicate things.
Absolutely. We we work at emotional levels and intellectual levels, and very often we overthink things, don't we? And
Yeah,
we, as you say, we overcomplicate things. So going back to your situation, Jules, there you were in this situation where you were not at one with what you were asked to do, shall we say, and it was having a detrimental impact on your health. Was that the catalyst for you breaking out of corporate and then starting on your own?
Well, I hadn't at the time realised what was going on. I had this idea that I wanted to do something a bit different, but I didn't really know what that was. And that's when I started to look at the idea of coaching. So this was back in 2013. I started the idea of, had a look at the variety of different things that I could do in learning about coaching. Because before that, I was a skeptic. Talk to me about personal development before 2013. And I was like a lot of the other people in the population, very skeptical. Oh, I'm all right. I'm okay. I don't need that. And yet when I started to look into it, I suddenly thought, actually, there's something a little bit more to life than what I'm doing. Now, the catalyst was my illness. So my illness was happened in 2014. I was hospitalized with a rare condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is an autoimmune condition which attacks your peripheral nervous system. And that meant that what happened to me was that over a five-day period, I went from being a normal person, going about my normal life, to being in an intensive care unit on a life support machine, completely paralyzed and locked into my own head. So I couldn't speak, couldn't do anything for myself. That was the reality of that. But that made me start to think things through slightly differently, as in using those things that I'd already learned to set my own goals. My first big goal was to walk out of hospital. Now, with many people were saying to me, Jules, you might not walk out of hospital. And I was saying to them, but I couldn't say to them because I couldn't talk. I was saying, well, I'm going to do my damnedest to walk out of hospital. But it wasn't just that goal there. It was all of the things that I had to do beforehand in order for me to get to that point. And it was like a roller coaster anyway, but 7 months after I was admitted to hospital, I walked out of hospital, and that was the start.
7 months?
7 months after, yeah.
You were in hospital for 7 months, goodness me.
Yes, I was in hospital for 7 months. And at one point, they didn't know whether I was going to walk or not. In fact, I'd actually stood up off my wheelchair 2 weeks before I walked out of hospital. So before then, I couldn't even stand up out of my wheelchair. Right. But because I was focused on what I wanted, things were happening. I had to work hard at it, but things were happening. Now, in answer to your question, did I know anything? I only realized or understood what was really happening to me before that time only relatively recently. Because and part of that was to give way to what my emotional feeling at the time was, start to work out what was really going on. And it is only very recently that I've really started to understand why that happened to me.
The wonders of hindsight.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping other people, because I went through it for a reason. I didn't know. I kept asking myself at that time, laying in in a hospital bed, you know, connected to all these machines, you have a long time to think about things. But I kept thinking to myself, there must be a reason for this. There's got to be a reason. I can't be in this situation for nothing, right? Can't be here, just laying here, just for nothing. And as I say, it's only recently that I've really come to terms with what was happening before, but also made a huge connection with what was happening before, so that I can help other people to understand that it's kind of a normal, it's quite normal, but there's another way. You don't have to go through serious illness for something to change. You can do something before you get to that point, and before the impact and the ripple effects kick in. If you start to understand it, or start to recognize what is it that you really want from your life, instead of what you think you should be doing, then you can change without too much difficulty. And this is where I come in, is to help people to focus on what it is that they want, and break down what all of those, you know, those limiting beliefs, if you like, those things that we've been programmed to think about. Start thinking about what we can do, and move towards what it is that goal is. And there's going to be challenges, but that's part of what I do, is to support you through those challenges. You know, that's where I've come from, and where I'm going to.
Wonderful, and so inspirational, having a personal story. Sad that you had to go through that, but as you say, it's not wasted. It was for a reason. And the difficulty I find is that people, they wait until the pain is so bad before they do something. So how do we get to people? You and I are in the same situation. I don't want people to get a stage 4 cancer diagnosis that I had. I got through mine in 3 months because I'm bloody minded, stubborn, and I wasn't going to be told when I was going to die. You did the same thing. So in our different ways, we've both come to where we are now through our experience, but also because of our tenacity and focus and all the rest of it. How do we instill that into other people?
Well, I think from both our perspectives, we have a massive story. We have a huge, powerful story, and I think that we have to use what we have to help people understand the pain that they're going through in their own in their own situation, and that actually there's something else that you can do. And I've been using a lot of my pain to engage with other people's pain, the pain that I went through, the feelings that I went through before that, you know, before all of this happened to me, you know, like the stress, the overwhelm, the anger, the disconnection in your relationships, the believing that you should be doing this instead of the stuff that you really want to do, and thinking about the benefits of change, you know, that you're happy. I mean, we all want to be happy. Is happiness brought through trying to make loads of money? I was reading something somewhere the other day, I can't remember who it was. You know, money doesn't bring you happiness. But we're programmed to think that extra few K will bring us happiness. But does it? Nice to have money, but does it actually bring us happiness?
No, it brings you more choices. That's about it.
And that's it, you know.
You can be miserable in comfort if you've got money.
Yeah, you know, so there's all of those elements. There's so many different elements that come into play here, you know, but I think ultimately it's satisfaction and happiness from the adversity of feeling those little signs, I kind of call them, where you're angry, you're stressed, as I say, your relationships are up the creek, and you know, and you're overworked, and you feel guilty if you just take 1 minute out of your day to do something for somebody, you know, do something for yourself. This can change. You can change this. We are responsible for ourselves. We have one life. I was lucky. I had two chances. I had a second chance. So my second chance is to hammer this point across of the fact that most of us only have one chance.
You inspirational, Jules. Absolute delight to speak with you and hear your story, and hopefully this podcast will help inspire others too. So take us to what happened. So 2014, you had this autoimmune disorder, you were paralysed, and then you mentioned in 2020 you started your coaching practice. So what happened in the intervening period?
So I had 2 years off work, and so I in that 2 years, I qualified as a coach. I did my qualification from the coaching academy, and sat down and thought, right, I'm gonna train to do this. If I've said I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. So I studied. I did lots of practical sessions with lots of different people, and I loved it. I absolutely loved doing what I was doing. I qualified as a coach in 2018, I think, in the end. Or was it? It was earlier than that. I went back to corporate. I went back to my job. They held what they did. They created a new job for me, and it was okay. But I was still not happy. I was just doing what I had to do, but then it felt incongruent to me. And then me and my wife moved from London to the coast. And it was the next step for me in thinking, if I'm going to run a business, I want to run this business, I need to do this now. I need to do it properly. So that's when I decided that I was going to leave corporate altogether. And there were certain reasons as well, I mean, you know, which I won't go into, but there were certain things that I wanted to align my life with much more than doing the corporate, because I felt as though while I was working in corporate, I wasn't being that congruent to the message that I wanted to bring across. So I decided to pack it all in and use the resources that I have to develop and create the business that I'm developing at the moment. So there was a period of time when, you know, I did work. I did work. I did study. I qualified. So all of that time wasn't wasted. It was there to give me that boost, that experience of what I was doing, but also the experience of the feeling of going back into corporate, but feeling incongruent, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier on about values and the pressure, the differences between personal values and corporate values, and the misalignment, and that's all wrapped up, isn't it? Because if we're not being true to ourselves, if we're not being authentic when we step into the corporate arena, then that has a detrimental effect on our health, period.
Yes,
no matter how we dress it up, no matter how we try and pretend. And when, you know, some people put on a suit or a uniform and they turn into somebody else for X number of hours per day, the stresses and strains build up. Then they go home carrying those stresses and strains with them, and over a period of time it builds and builds and builds, and then one day the body says, I'm not doing this anymore.
And that's basically what happened to me. I used to call the suit of armor, because you put this protection thing around you. You create this persona that's different to you. One of the things that I've learnt since being in my own business is about authenticity. And it's taken me quite a while to understand what that really means. But it's removing that need to show up as somebody different to who you really are. Because the reality is that people will gravitate towards you because of who you are, rather than gravitate towards that person that's in a suit. You know, there's always that sort of, that barrier when you're in a suit. You know, I wonder how many people negotiate, you know, big business deals in suits and are feeling really, really racked inside themselves because they're not really being honest, actually. You know, they're not being honest, and they're having to protect something that they don't believe in. There's a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens all the time. You actually see it. I see it time and time again with the behavioural profiles that I run on my system, the DISC system. And we can see, without even meeting somebody, how authentic they're being in the workplace and how that is affecting their health and well-being. Just with a few graphs, we can see the patterns. So what advice would you give, Jules, to anybody who maybe is feeling out of alignment? Maybe they're going through the motions at work, they don't know how to get out of it because they've got big bills to pay, they've got themselves into this bit of a funk with the expectations of other people, they're not really being true to themselves. What should they do?
Well, one of my biggest pieces of advice is take that step back. Take a step back and work out what it is that you really enjoy in your life. I think that's one thing that I think that people lose sight of, is what do you enjoy? What is it that you love about your life? And how can you harness that in developing something that you would love to do and move towards? And it doesn't have to be a risky thing, because it can be the seeds that are sown that can create the tree, if you like, you know. So it's, even if you've got, let's say, for example, if you've got an ambition to do something, but you haven't got a clue how to get out of your current situation, you can still start to sow those seeds by thinking about that thing. But you have to take that step back and start thinking, okay, what can I do now? What do I need? What do I need to put in place to get to that point where I'm really enjoying what I do?
Taking the first step.
Yeah. You know, and all of those things, you know, even employing a coach or something, or somebody, even going and having one coaching session just to start to work on that one thing. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday about brainstorming some ideas. What could you do? What do you like doing? What do you really enjoy doing? And also, what don't you like doing? Because you need to understand that as well. Because you can then make two lists. Just sit down and clear your head of all your thoughts. Get it down on paper. And it's like taking that step back, getting it all down on paper so that you can start to make that move.
Great advice. How do people get hold of you, Jules?
So I'm on LinkedIn. Okay, you can find me on LinkedIn. I do have a website which is constantly being updated. I'm on Facebook as well, and you know, if you want to get hold of me, I've got an email address, jules@julesturner.co.uk. I've got mobile phone, which I can drop you a line on that one, Elaine, if you want. So I'm out there. you'll see lots of posts on LinkedIn, because I use LinkedIn more than I do Facebook, but I am out there just putting stuff out there.
Wonderful. So your website, julesturner.co.uk.
Co.uk, yeah.
Marvellous. Thank you so much for your time sharing your inspirational story today, Jules, and best of luck in developing your coaching, which I think particularly for men is a very good thing that you've done, because men identify with men, and the fact that you're walking your talk, and you've got the experience. I take my hat off to you.
Well, thank you very much, Elaine, for inviting me on today. It's been a pleasure to share my story and my experience.
Marvellous. Let's get this out there so more people can get inspiration from you. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you very much.